The god acknowledges you as his son, Alexander. Your destiny is assured.
Sand hisses under hoof and boot. The horizon a white blade of light. A small column moves through the Libyan desert. Breath slow, lips salted, eyes narrowed against the glare. At its center rides a young king who refuses to blink. He has crossed rivers that tried to drown him, walls that swore they could not fall. Yet nothing feels as immense as this silence. No spears, no siege towers, just the long road to an answer. They told him he wasn't merely a king, he was something more.
The god acknowledges you as his son, Alexander. Your destiny is assured.
When Alexander walked out of the desert shrine at Siwa, he wore a different face. Was it prophecy, or the most dangerous belief a conqueror can carry? The dunes breathe like sleeping beasts. A guide points west. Another day, another night the stars arrive cold, innumerable, unjudging. Alexander studies them with the same focus he gives to maps and men. He does not ask them for permission. He measures them like distances. He has learned that the world often bows to those who move first. A wind rises thin, needling, relentless. Cloaks snap, camels groan. Somewhere in that pale furnace of daylight, the oasis of Siwa waits. Date palms, clear water, and a shrine whose keepers guard old words. Travelers say pilgrims leave with fewer doubts, or with heavier ones. He recalls lessons and steadies his breath. A tutor who trained his mind to weigh ideas without being trapped by them. Veterans who taught him that ground decides as much as courage. Quiet counsel reminding him that a leader's heart must not harden like bronze. He carries all of this like a shield you cannot see. Night returns cool, velvet forgiving. The camp murmurs, fires crackle. Sparks climb and vanish into a sky so wide it hushes, even the loudest egos. Alexander sits near the edge of the firelight, the place where light ends and thinking begins. He closes his eyes, not to dream, but to arrange the past into a path. A boy and a black horse, first. The horse feared its own shadow, rearing, violent until the boy turned it toward the sun. So the shadow fell behind. A small solution with a wide echo. Face the light, and fear loses its outline. He named the horse Persepolis. The horse named the boy to himself. Another memory follows the day he stood beside seasoned soldiers and did not shrink. A spear can lengthen your reach, so can calm. A shield can keep you safe, so can truth spoken when others are afraid. He learned to listen for the sound a crowd makes right before it decides to trust. Before dawn the column moves. Sunrise draws a blade from its sheath silver, then gold, heat climbs. Miles fall away. The oasis reveals itself in fragments. A cool scent, a dark line on the horizon. Birds that appear like thoughts you forgot you had. Then palms, water, stone. The shrine stands with the confidence of old things that do not need to explain themselves. Its guardians meet him with quiet eyes. There are rituals here, and respect, and boundaries. Alexander's men fall back. He enters with the humility of a visitor and the certainty of a leader who knows why he has come, not for flattery, not for spectacle, but for clarity. Inside, shadow and light braid the air. The stone holds a different temperature from the desert. It feels like memory. A voice speaks not loud, not theatrical, simple, measured, unhurried. Questions meet answers, titles meet responsibilities, ambition meets accountability. The room seems to breathe with each exchange. What did he hear? We will not claim what we cannot verify. We will not dress rumor as truth. But this much is certain. He emerged not inflated, but aligned, not arrogant, but sharpened. His stride did not grow heavier with pride. It grew steadier with purpose. It was as if scattered intentions clicked into one beam. Outside, the oasis chatter resumes, water lifted, dates gathered, camels grumbling, soldiers glance over. Some expect spectacle, others fear it. They see only a young man stepping from shadow into sun, eyes set, jaw quiet, shoulders level. Something has changed, but it is not a crown, not a robe, not a new title. It is an angle, the angle of a decision that will measure every mile ahead. He does not boast. He does not announce. He drinks water slowly, nods to his officers, and marks the next marches on the sand with the tip of a spear. The line he draws is clean. East, a road towards cities that think themselves untouchable. A sea that believes it cannot be crossed. A knot whose fame depends on not being solved. He will test them, and if they refuse to yield, he will change the terms. This is the hidden engine inside Alexander's life. Not noise, not rage, not hunger for applause, but the calm resolve that says, if the door is sealed, make a door. If the wall is high, change the ground. If time says no, move so decisively that time must follow. He mounts Bucephalus. The horse snorts, remembering open fields and the pact between them. Trust for trust, courage for courage. The column forms. Shields catch the sun. Standards lift and flutter. The oasis recedes behind them like a chapter that has done its work. Ahead lies dust, distances, decisions. People will say he chased glory. Others will say he chased knowledge. Some will say he chased the horizon because it kept stepping back and he could not abide retreat. All contain a sliver of truth. Watch him closely. When a moment could be solved with spectacle, he prefers structure. When an obstacle offers the theater of trying, he answers with the mathematics of doing. The desert teaches with few words. Crossing it leaves a mark on those who listen. Alexander listened. He learned that thirst clarifies. That a leader who hoards water ruins tomorrow. That mercy is not weakness when it preserves strength for the right battle. That patience is not delay when it preserves lives for the right hour. He carries letters and maps, advice and warnings. He carries memories of a home that expects more than victory. It expects wisdom. He carries a sense that the earth is wider than stories admit, and that walking it with discipline is a form of gratitude. Night settles. The men lie on woven mats. The desert becomes a roof of stars again. Alexander traces constellations with one gloved finger, not to claim them, but to remember that even the brightest patterns are made of distances. You cannot rush distances. You cross them with steadiness. Before sleep, he rehearses a rule he will use again and again. At walls of stone, on islands of defiance, before gates that pretend to be the ends of the earth. Do not argue with the impossible. Change its shape. In the mornings to come, he will set this rule against cities whose pride is older than his flag. He will set it against fear dressed as tradition. He will walk water when Tyre says no. He will draw steel across a legend when a knot pretends to be law. He will turn flames into a verdict when a palace demands a reckoning with the past. And when unity requires more than treaties, he will attempt a braid harder than war, softer than defeat. For now, the desert keeps its counsel. The fires dim to red eyes blinking slow. The soldiers rest. Bucephalus dreams in small twitches of hoof and ear, and just past the edge of sleep, between plan and prayer, Alexander accepts something simple and heavy. A leader is not the sum of what others call him. A leader is the sum of what he refuses to abandon. Discipline, mercy, patience, resolve. He wakes before dawn. He breathes deeply. The day accepts him. The road invites. He answers from this quiet decision at Siwa. A life will unfold in chapters that feel like thunder, bridges pulled from the sea, riddles cut into silence, cities reborn under new names, enemies turned into allies, allies turned into lessons, and at the end, an unanswered question that refuses to die. Was it prophecy, or the most dangerous belief a conqueror can carry? Hold that question. We will carry it into every battle, every treaty, every city that hears a new language echo under its gates, until the horizon finally answers back. Morning breaks over ridgelines of Macedon, dew shining on barley fields, hills stretching like watchful shoulders around a valley of horses and iron. Before empires and echoes, there is a household that wakes with the sun, a father who measures worth in results, and a boy who learns that the world respects what you can build with your own hands. The air smells of leather reins and wet earth. From the stables comes the low thunder of hooves, a daily chorus that will one day become the rhythm of campaigns. He grows beneath a roof where the talk is not of softness, but of structure. His father, a ruler with a soldier's patience, does something more powerful than command. He organizes. New spears longer than before. New formations disciplined like a single living creature, not a crowd, but a body. The men learn to move as one, to hold the line, to trust the space between them as much as the steel in their grip. The lesson is simple and demanding. Courage wins moments, structure wins years. The boy watches. He sees how a seasoned leader takes lands that were restless and turns them into a chorus that can carry a single melody. He learns that unity is not noise. It is many strengths tuned to the same note. He notices that walls do not merely fall to bravery, they fall to patience, to planning, to the quiet work done before the trumpets ever sound. He rides early. The horse beneath him is not merely an animal, it is a mirror. When the rider's mind wanders, the horse wanders. When the rider is tense, the horse is tense. When the rider is calm and decisive, the horse trusts the path. The boy discovers that leadership is like this. People are not pushed into courage, they relax into it when your calm steadies their breathing. With every ride, he practices how to be clear when the world becomes loud. At Misa, a grove where knowledge is treated like a living stream, a tutor opens a door that steel cannot. Scrolls unfold, not as decoration, but as maps of the inner life. Ethics as a compass. Logic as a whetstone. History as a set of questions. What did others try? What did they miss? Which mistake repeats itself when pride writes the plan? The tutor teaches him to separate desire from decision, to ask not only whether something can be done, but whether it should be done and when. He reads of journeys and judgments, of leaders who mistook applause for wisdom, of cities that confused tradition with truth. He learns to admire excellence without worshipping it. He marks a line in his mind. Ambition must be yoked to responsibility. A leader does not chase fires. A leader sets lanterns along a road so others can walk without fear. The boy's world grows wider, not because he believes he is above others, but because he understands how many kinds of strength. The world contains craftsmen, farmers, scouts, healers, builders. An army moves on all of them, back home. The reforms continue. Spears lengthen, drills sharpen. Officers are chosen not for talk, but for timing. The veterans show him how a camp breathes, how logistics decide as much as valor, how kindness to civilians strengthens the ground you stand on, and how discipline, real discipline, means you obey the standard you set for others. The boy learns to walk the rows silently at night, to check water barrels, to ask a sentry how his family fares, to remember names. Authority gains weight when it remembers faces. There is a city to the south that once laughed at northern steel. The laughter fades as lines of polished bronze cast long morning shadows and boots strike in unison. The boy sees that respect is not torn from the world. It is earned in layers. First from the men who follow you, then from those who watch. How you treat victory. He notices something else. Power that brags shrinks. Power that serves grows. He practices the small decisions that become large ones later. He learns to keep counsel, to speak last when tempers are hot, to search a room for the person who is quiet. But seeing far, he learns to ask scouts not only what they saw, but what they did not see and expected to. He discovers that certainty without curiosity is just pride in armor. A leader who stops learning is a leader who begins to lose, even when the banners still look bright. In the training yard, the phalanx breathes like a lung. Shields overlap, a silver wall, spearheads glint, a field of stars at ground level. When the command comes, the wall moves, not as men but as intention carried by flesh. The boy steps in and feels the lesson in his bones. Unity multiplies courage. Alone, a soldier is iron. Together, they are a storm the ground remembers. He understands that his future will depend on how well he can keep many wills braided into one purpose. He hears stories from travelers, of coasts where the water turns a deeper blue than any dye, of markets where languages mingle like birdsong, of fortresses carved into rock that rises from the sea, of an empire across the horizon whose rulers think history belongs to them by birthright. The boy listens, and the map inside him changes. It is no longer a page, it is a promise. At night, under a lamp, he studies the art of letters and the weight of silence. Words can steady a city, silence can steady a room. The skill is knowing when to use which. He writes plans in a hand that grows more confident each season. Supply lines, winter quarters, the temperament of neighboring tribes, the terrain around a town whose gate faces the wrong direction, the location of a ford that turns a river from an obstacle into a bridge. He learns that the smallest detail can become the hinge on which a year swings. He also learns restraint. When insult arrives, the first answer is not always the best. When praise arrives, it must not purchase your judgment. When fear arrives, meet it with preparation. When opportunity arrives, do not chase it if your people are not ready. Opportunity kept is often worth more than opportunity rushed. The household changes as he grows. Messengers arrive more often. Maps cover more tables. The conversations widen from village paths to continental roads. The boy no longer much a boy walks between the armory and the library and feels no contradiction. Steel without thought is waste. Thought without steel is wish. He will need both. One afternoon, in a field rimmed with poplars, he tests the speed at which a formation can pivot when the wind changes and dust blinds the eyes. The officers frown at the difficulty. He insists they try again. They shave seconds, then heartbeats. Later, when the sea tries to dictate the rules of war, that habit of practicing hard corners will keep many men alive. A guest arrives from the east, bearing coins, stamped with careful profiles, stories laser, cut with pride, and warnings disguised as boasts. The guest's empire is vast, he says, and its kings are patient, and its roads are straight, and its granaries deep. The young commander thanks him and listens harder to what is not said, that vast empires sometimes mistake size for certainty, that patience can harden into arrogance, that straight roads can lead to predictable choices, that deep granaries make armies feel safe enough to be slow. He writes none of this down. He simply remembers. He spends more time with craftsmen. A siege engineer shows him the heart of a catapult and explains that distance is a conversation between weight, tension, and release. A carpenter explains how wood remembers the tree it came from. Some planks want to bend, others insist on straightness, and why smart builders listen before they cut. A blacksmith demonstrates the patience of fire at the right heat, the way iron accepts a new shape if you respect its limits. He realizes a campaign is a workshop under the sky. You do not bully materials. You learn how each element agrees to become part of the whole. In the barracks, he speaks to a young recruit who misses home. He does not promise that war will be easy. He promises that leadership will not waste the recruit's courage. He knows men can carry weight if they believe it is for something clean. So he straightens standards others let sag. He punishes theft that harms the weak. He rewards mercy that protects the innocent. He makes it known that victory that stains your soul is not victory. It is a bill that the future will collect with interest. A letter arrives with sharp news. A neighbor tests the borders, counting on hesitation. The answer is firm and measured. Not fury, not panic, not spectacle. A response that communicates two truths at once. We are not eager for conflict, and we will not permit injury. Word returns. The neighbor understood. Sometimes the finest victory is the one where no blood needs to be replaced. He prays in his own way before sleep, asking for clarity of judgment, for fairness in victory, for strength to protect those who cannot lift a shield. He knows that power without conscience is a storm that destroys its own roof. The world may celebrate quick triumphs, but time itself respects the builders. Seasons turn. He gains not only command, but the trust that makes command worth having. In the mirror of still water, he studies a face that is changing, less boy, more burden, But the burden sits well when he remembers why he carries it. He walks the perimeter of the camp, one last time before a departure that will redraw maps. He checks the wagons, he checks the ropes, he checks the faces of his officers for the quiet signs that someone is tired in the wrong way. Where he sees a fray, he knots it. Where he sees pride rising, he sets it down gently with a reminder. We are strong because we are careful. Dawn, standards rise like a forest of promises. The ground trembles with hooves. The columns begin to move, not as hunger, but as intention. He is ready, not because he believes himself invincible, but because he has gathered the tools that make rashness unnecessary discipline, patience, respect for detail, and the habit of thinking past the first answer. Behind him lie the classrooms and the courtyards, the drill fields and the forges, the small rooms, where a leader learns how to hold a map without letting pride hold the pencil. Ahead lies a world that will test every line he has drawn. He does not rush the first step. He places it carefully, as if the earth is listening. Perhaps it is. The forge is complete. And when it does, it will not be wild, it will be guided by a mind that has learned to match courage with conscience, speed with structure, and ambition with the steady weight of responsibility. A kingdom does not wait politely for youth to ripen. It tests suddenly and without ceremony. News rides faster than couriers. A king is gone. A son inherits weight measured not only in metal, but in eyes. Some eyes look for steadiness. Others look for an opening. In courtyards and council rooms, in stables and on hilltops, choices gather like storm clouds. A leader's first act is not to speak loudly, it is to steady the air. He begins at home. Promises made are honored. Oaths are renewed. The chain of command is confirmed with calm hands and clear sentences. The message moves through the ranks and across the villages. Continuity without cruelty, firmness without panic. Where ambition mutters, it is met with fairness backed by preparation. Where loyalty speaks, it is answered with trust that has work to do. To the south, cities watch for hesitation. Silence, if it lasts too long, becomes an invitation. He does not let it. He moves with order, not swagger. Meetings, envoys, demonstrations of readiness. He reminds the restless that stability is a neighbor's best friend. He reminds the faithful that discipline has not changed. Water is counted, rations are honest, and orders arrive on time. In the squares, boots ring in unison on stone. The sound is not threat, it is the rhythm of agreements kept. There is a breach to mend and a warning to send. He delivers both in one motion. A revolt is quelled swiftly, then contained with rules that protect non-combatants. Structures that must stand are spared. Innocents are shielded. Those who sought to profit from chaos learn that speed and restraint can share the same table. Word of this balance travels as fast as any trumpet. The north steadies, the south listens. Maps turn east, not as a whim, not as a chase, but as a considered answer to a long question. What do you do when a horizon has leaned over your border for years, reminding you that your story is only one of many? You move with respect for scale, humility before distance, and a plan that treats the unknown as a teacher rather than a trophy. On a broad morning, the army reaches the strait. Wind presses flags flat. The water is a restless page, blue slate one moment, broken glass the next. To the far side lies a continent, taught to believe its rulers define the size of human ambition. He does not insult them with easy slogans. He prepares to meet them with craft, patience, and the full discipline of a body that has trained to move as one will. Before the crossing, he walks the shoreline alone and lets the cold spray steady his thoughts. He remembers lessons that have kept their edge. Haste without preparation is fear in armor. Anger without purpose is waste. He checks the order of embarkation, the sequence of ships, the anchors, the lines. A river or a sea does not care about titles. It cares about weight, wind, and timing. Respect nature's rules, and it will allow you to pass. Ignore them, and it will keep what you love. The men board by units, quiet, practiced, focused, horses snort at the unfamiliar sway. Handlers soothe them with voices worn smooth by long partnership. Officers review contingencies for weather and separation. Archers stow case lids. Engineers secure the gear that will matter later more than fanfare ropes, pulleys, spare timbers. The simple tools that make impossible walls become solvable problems. They land on the far shore with a kind of relief that does not exhale yet. The first camp is founded on attentiveness. Pickets go out with strict instructions. Fires are placed where their light will not make targets. Scouts slip forward in pairs. Tracks are read like sentences. At dawn, a rider returns with news shaped like a challenge. A river to the east, defenders on the far bank. Not a barrier, a test. The Granicus runs cold and fast, its surface bright with the arrogance of spring melt. On the far shore, lines gather cavalry, infantry, standards that have stood against rashness before. Between the two armies, a living ribbon of force insists that patience is the first weapon. The council in his tent is divided. Some prefer to wait for lower water or a better angle. Others urge boldness before the enemy grows thicker. He listens with respect, then lays down a decision that carries both caution and momentum. The formation to enter the river is arranged like an argument that will prove itself step by step. Light troops to harry, mounted men in echelon to pull attention wide, heavier units ready to turn a foothold into a crossing. He knows the danger. A river robs an attacker of balance, multiplies noise, and turns every stumble into a signal. He also knows the opportunity. The far bank's confidence can harden into a fixed idea. Fixed ideas are brittle at the edges. He rides the line slowly, not to glitter, but to lend steadiness. He speaks to officers in tones they will copy when the river tries to get inside the men's heads. He reminds them of the old rule that earned its place by surviving real days. When sight is confused, cling to method. Method is a lamp, even when mud is in your eyes. The signal. A murmur that becomes a shout. Hooves bite at stones. Water climbs to knees, to thighs, to saddles. Arrows churn the air. Shields rise. The first clash is not glorious. It is messy, close, and decided by inches. Horses shy at splashes. Riders correct with knees and prayerful focus. He is there where confusion peaks, not as a hero seeking applause, but as a lever applied at the right pivot. He finds seams, not because a story demands them, but because training has taught him to see them. A small wedge opens. It is widened by men who trust patterns. They drilled until they could perform them half asleep. On the bank, the footing improves. The clash thickens. The opposing cavalry fights with skill and courage that deserves respect. He answers with combinations practiced in dust and rain, feint and refuse, hook and press, breathe and break, then hold. The river now sits at their backs like a judge. One violent retreat would drown order. He refuses retreat by making patience look like aggression, advance by a measure. Lock shields, let fatigue change sides, then advance again. Momentum tilts, space opens where a moment ago there was only noise. He does not chase disorder too far. He guards the mouth of victory from the hunger that ruins plans. Enemy cavalry break unevenly, and infantry must decide whether to stand without their traditional cover. Some do, fiercely. He records their courage silently and makes a note he will follow later. Dignity is a bridge after battle when you want tomorrow to hold. By late light, the field is decided. The river no longer shouts. It murmurs as if surprised. He leaves no room for cruelty. Wounded are treated. Captives are sorted with care. Messengers are dispatched not to boast, but to arrange what prevents waste. Burial for those who fought bravely. Assessment of stores. The counted patience of logistics. Orders go out for guards to protect local households from the chaos that often follows a broken line. War without discipline is just theft with drums. He will not allow it. At the edge of the field, he thanks the men who held and the men who turned the holding into movement. He remembers names. He stoops to adjust a loose strap on a tired horse. He kneels briefly by a fallen comrade and promises, with the gravity that comes from keeping promises before. that the living will not be squandered to cover anyone's pride. That night, the camp is quiet in the way only an army can be when effort has been fully spent and order has been restored. He stands outside his tent and listens to the layered hush, a cook scraping a pot, a sentry clearing his throat, the far-off creak of leather as a sleeping horse shifts. Across the dark, small lamps burn in local homes. He instructs his officers again to respect these households. A soldier who behaves with honor tonight is a soldier who is safer tomorrow. He writes by lamplight, not to celebrate, but to remember the pattern while it is fresh. Rivers require humility. Enemy cavalry must be drawn into uneven ground. Signals must remain simple when brains are loud with fear, and victory must become structure immediately, or it melts by morning. He adds a line about the men who surprised him with their courage, and another about an officer who needs a quieter aide with better eyes. Tomorrow's improvements are born from tonight's honesty. Word will travel across the wider world that a young commander crossed a hard river and did not drown. Some will shrug, some will worry, some will pretend not to have heard. He does not build his next step on their reactions. He builds it on the same pillars that carried him across moving water preparation. Respect for the facts that do not care about feelings, and the habit of turning inches into outcomes. In the morning, the army rises without swagger. Kit is checked. Lines are dressed. The column forms. The first crossing has been made, not as a gamble, but as a demonstration of a rule he intends to apply again and again. Do not ask obstacles for permission. Learn their language, then speak first. Beyond the river, the road bends towards cities that believe walls end conversations. He has no intention of shouting from the outside. He intends to arrive with the tools that turn final answers into new doors. Morning finds the army moving through a country of vineyards and stone terraces, the roads wide enough to carry old empires and new intentions. Word has run ahead of the columns like wind through wheat. Not only that a river was crossed under steel, but that order survived the crossing. Villages test the rumor and find it true. The markets remain open, the wells are respected, prices are fair, and soldiers who forget themselves are corrected by officers who do not. At Sardis, walls that once shone with confidence consider the shape of the force approaching their gates. This city carries the memory of gold and decisions made in rooms, thick with old pride. The commander does not arrive with a speech written for applause. He arrives with terms that make tomorrow possible. The garrison assesses the arithmetic of resistance, supplies, morale, the distance to relief. Arithmetic wins. Keys are presented with ceremony, but without tragedy. The standard rises on the citadel, and the city exhales. The soldiers secure the armory, then step back from homes and markets. A proclamation repeats what has already been seen. Salt will not be stolen. Household doors will be respected, and those who trade fairly will be protected. The message under the message is simple. This is not chaos, this is structure. Further along the coast, in cities where Greek is spoken, and sea winds have taught people to negotiate with the horizon, a new policy is tested in the open. Local councils are invited to speak for themselves. Those who wish to shape their own daily affairs are given the chance with clear limits written for stability. Tyrants who used fear like a tax find that the tax has been repealed. This is not mere generosity. It is geometry. When people feel order in their own hands, they are more likely to guard it. A commander who respects conscience finds that ports and warehouses work with him rather than against him. At Miletus, the sea proposes its old argument: whoever rules the water rules the day. The opposing fleet gathers like polished crows and waits for a show of bravado. He refuses them theater. Instead, he uses the land to cancel the ocean's advantage. Strong points rise where the shoreline allows. Artillery speaks with measured rhythm, and sorties are timed to isolate rather than dazzle. Engineers become the quiet heroes of the hour, laying timbers and angles that turn ships into guests rather than gatekeepers. The result is not spectacular, it is conclusive. The city learns that courage guided by patience can bend an element to its will without shouting. Halicarnassus is different. It sits on rock and memory, tense and well supplied. Its defenders led by minds that can smell weak planning at a distance. Here, the work is long. Ramps inch forward with the stubborn logic of ants. Towers crawl toward walls that spit fire and stone. Night assaults feel the sting of counterattacks. Ladders scrape, shields ring, and in the smoky confusion, a commander must become what he trained to be, the center that does not tilt when the edges burn. He refuses to be drawn into reckless exchanges that trade lives for noise. He sets rotations that keep fatigue from deciding in the enemy's favor. He praises vigilance more than daring and reminds his captains that a small breach held with order is worth more than a great spectacle that collapses by dawn. There are setbacks because real sieges do not care about tidy stories. A sortie surprises an outer work. Torches bite into dry wood. Shouts climb a wall of dust. He answers the way he will answer for years to come, by turning panic into tasks. Buckets here, extinguish there. Pull back 2 files to create room for movement. Then push 3 files where the defense has overreached. The ground is studied after sunrise, as if it is a witness with a helpful memory. What failed becomes instruction. What worked becomes doctrine. Bit by measured bit, the defenders are denied the initiative they need. Finally, they understand they cannot keep this place without turning it into ash. They hurt what they cannot hold and slip away into the shadows of retreat. The city remains battered but breathing, and the lesson is logged as carefully as the stores. An enemy is bested not only when he is beaten, but when he is denied the crisis he craves. Through each city, a reputation hardens that will matter more than any trumpeter. He punishes cruelty, especially when it preys on the weak. He rewards restraint where anger would have been easy. He places governors who count grain before they count flattery. He keeps tax collectors honest and makes thieves learn that mercy does not mean blindness. He attends to bridges, roads, and granaries, as if the future will measure him by the number of winters his decisions can carry. He knows that banners can travel farther than supply wagons, but armies cannot. Logistics is not a dull word in his camp. It is the language of survival. The coast yields to inland roads that run like careful stitches through valleys and over passes. Autumn touches the hills with iron on the wind. The column moves at the pace of good judgment. Scouts are given wide arcs and exact questions. He wants to know where streams narrow under rock, where herds can be bought fairly, where a ford will turn treachery into a path, and where a road offers beauty while hiding trouble. He listens to locals with the respect he gives engineers. People who live under a mountain understand how it breathes. In the city of Gordium, the air carries the sober scent of winter wood and hammered bronze. Traders tilt scales with the finesse of people who know small errors make big enemies. In the center of the old citadel sits a wagon yoked to a riddle. Its pole is fastened with a knot that has bullied clever fingers and proud reputations for generations. The story attached to it promises a future to whoever can unfasten the coils properly. A circle gathers, because circles always gather when pride and puzzles meet. He does not rush the thing. He studies it as he studies a coastline or a cliff, not as a trophy, but as a problem with rules. The knot is not magic. It is a design set to insult haste. When he tests the lines, he feels where old fibers have stiffened with time, where tension has buried slack. He tries a twist, a pull, another turn. The knot has no interest in courtliness. It has survived on the diets of fragile tempers and public pressure. He steps back to see the whole, not the strands. People murmur. Opinion rises like heat. Some want patience praised, even if it wastes the day. Some want force applauded, even if it wastes the point. He remembers something he has been practicing since he faced a nervous horse as a boy. When a problem insists on deciding your posture, decide it first. He draws steel not to terrify, but to clarify. One clean downward cut fibers part. The riddle collapses into rope. The circle gasps, then fractures into interpretations. He is not careless with meanings. He is careful with seconds. The road ahead needs a commander who can test conventions without becoming their servant. The tale will travel in many versions. He does not spend his breath managing rumors. He uses the lesson for his officers. Some obstacles are designed to consume time rather than defend truth. If you find yourself negotiating with that kind of obstacle, change the terms. Do not be brutal, be precise. Do not be theatrical, be simple. Do not worship rules, written only to keep you at the door. Make a new door, then walk through in ordered winter deepens. He calls councils under roofs that remember older winters. Maps spread, pins mark warehouses. Lines link river crossings to roads that are reliable, even when frost writes its opinions on the dirt. He asks engineers for honest assessments of timber and stone where the campaign will next require leverage. He asks physicians how quickly the men can be hardened to colder marches without breaking. He asks quartermasters to count as if the new year will hold them accountable personally for every sack of grain. He does not threaten. He assigns responsibility with the clarity that frees people to be excellent. Babylon breathes in the heat of evening. Lamps lining the river like careful stars laid by human hands. Reports lie open on the table, roads mended, canals cleared, ports learning the grammar of wind. Ships are taking shape to map coasts. No one in his camp has named aloud. The work is not thunder. It is the quiet rhythm of a world being stitched together so children can sleep. Grief sits in the room as well. Loss has knocked and been answered with dignity. He moves through his days with the same rule that carried him across rivers and deserts. Count what matters, correct what fails, praise what serves, and never spend lives to polish pride. When he speaks of the future, it is not to promise an endless horizon. It is to assign responsibilities, to write down the standards that let fairness outlive the voice that first set them. Illness does not ask permission. It arrives like a shadow across paper, cooling ink that was still wet. In a city that has heard every kind of rumor, a bed becomes the center of the map. He refuses spectacle. He asks for order. Officers gathered, plans handed over cleanly. Guardians named for the young garrisons, reminded that the uniform serves the household, not the other way around. He speaks of roads, of markets, of weights at the scales and names on the pay lists. He asks that shrines be respected, that community law be kept clear, that justice not be bent by greed. He does not try to hold breath he cannot keep. He chooses to pass responsibility rather than fear. When the room finally quiets, the question we have carried since the desert comes and takes a chair. Was it prophecy or belief sharpened into duty? Perhaps it was never a riddle about titles. Perhaps it was always a test about character. A boy who turned a frightened horse toward the sun. A commander who cut a knot because time belonged to the living. A builder who drew a city from sand so trade and learning could meet. A ruler who met a worthy opponent in rain and answered strength with honor. A leader who turned back at the hyphasis because protecting tomorrow is also victory. What remains is not the roar of a charge. What remains is the sound of markets opening safely. The straight line of a causeway where waves once owned the conversation. The dignity of families, spared when defeat could have been used to humiliate. The habit repeated until it became a standard of counting the weak in every plan. That is the kind of power time respects. That is the kind of greatness that does not need to shout. Look at your own map now. Where is the river that insists you wait until you are ready? Where is the knot that wastes your hours because it thrives on ceremony? Where is the island that laughs at you from a small distance, asking whether you will rage at the water or build a road through it? Where is the plain that wants you to mistake size for certainty? Where is the moment when turning back would not be defeat, but wisdom? Choose the method that outlives noise. Choose fairness over swagger. Choose patience that builds courage that protects, discipline that frees more people than it frightens. You do not need a crown to practice any of this. You need a standard you refuse to drop. If this story moved you, if the human being inside the legend helped you see your own next step, tell me what you will build. Share the single decision you will make today that protects tomorrow. Write it in the comments so others can borrow your courage. If you want more history told with heart, with respect, and with the practical lessons left clean and usable, subscribe now, like this video, and share it with someone who needs to hear that strength is most beautiful when it is fair. Carry the question with you, not as a slogan, but as a compass. When you stand at your own desert doorway, let your belief be this: the world changes when you make impossible things practical and keep the weakest in the circle of your plans. That is how legends become laws, how conquest becomes care, and how your life, however far it travels, leaves a road others can walk in safety.